This is the Open University.
The professor, after releasing a Bandcamp album of outtakes, he's hard at work making a new album called Yikes. It's as if he's sort of saying tally ho, yikes, yoiks and tally ho. A new year has come around, the calendar has flipped, and this is a chance to make a new pop record about the state of our times, the time of our states. Yum. Perhaps I should have called it Yum. It's hard work. It's tough on the ears, it's tough on the body. The way I work is very solitary. I'm only able to be making this album in Paris. Usually I work in Berlin on my own. My girlfriend who lives here, this is her flat in Paris, is away in Italy. She works in fashion and they have some workshops and fashion shows and things which she's part of. So that gives me the chance of an empty flat and the sort of irregularity of hours. I mean, you can be working any time of day or night. Deep in headphones, you need a certain unbroken concentration and the ability when you're finished just to flop into bed and fall asleep at any time and to get up at any time. All that stuff. So I've been getting slight eye strain headaches and sort of sparkles in my eyes and malnutrition and all sorts of things because of the irregularity. But it's also, you also get real euphoria. I personally, this is my vacation, is making songs. It's something I do well. I don't seem to have run out of steam. So this is my first Paris album since The Philosophy of Momus in 1995, very dominated by the influence of Beck. My last album, made in Berlin last year, Krambambuli, was influenced by an obscure Japanese chanson singer called Megumi Satsu, who came to live in Paris and worked with Parisian writers like Topor, for instance. But there doesn't seem to be a presiding figure, although there is an emerging presiding figure on this new work, which is Leo Ferré. So let's start with the title anyway, Yikes. Why did I choose this title? It was just the first word in the first song, Threnody. It starts with with Yikes. Yikes, the executioners come wobbling round again. I guess a bit of a theme is I'm worried, as Stuart Lee put it in one of his comedy routines, he said we're sort of living in the golden period between the pandemic and the war. And it does look a bit, I've read news reports saying China is preparing in 2027 to invade Taiwan, etc., etc. So who knows, we may be in a sort of golden couple of years before we're plunged into a horrific war. I hope I'm wrong about that. But that seems to be a bit of a theme that's in Yikes. So Yikes, as an expression, apparently the dictionaries say it was coined in the 1970s, and it's both US and UK slang, which is quite unusual. It possibly derives from yoiks tally-ho, which is a fox hunting call from the 18th century. But it's got an interesting, series of meanings. It's an expression of shock or dread, but it's comical. It's kind of trivial, and someone with a humorous attitude looking at something a bit scary. So it's an anticipation of something problematical on the horizon, an exclamation, yikes. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of The Fall. There's a song titled by The Fall called Two Encroachment Yarbles, which always seemed to me like a kind of weird personal spelling of Yarbu sucks, which is sort of Viz speak, Viz comic speak, which maybe Mark E. Smith picked up on. Encroachment spelt just N-C-R-O-A. A strange little track, a very interesting little sketch by The Fall. So there's no Megumi Satsu this year, but French chanson is still very present. The thing I've been most impressed by musically this year, young as it is, the year is just over a month old, was the soundtrack for Poor Things. I went in the cinema to see Poor Things, which is of course a film by the Greek director Yorgos Lanthimos, of Alistair Gray's novel, Poor Things, which came out in 1992, our greatest Scottish author of living memory, Alistair Gray. And it's a fantastic film, very inventive, very playful, a picaresque about a kind of Frankensteinian woman and her doctor creator. And it's a bit different from the novel, but a thoroughly entertaining romp, and with great music by a guy called Jerskin Fendrix, who I hadn't heard of previously, and whose songs I'm not so keen on because they use sort of techno sounds, which I'm a little bit dubious about. But the soundtrack on the album is amazing. He recorded with traditional instruments, like especially woodwinds and things, but he used Pro Tools to slow them down and slide them around, make them monstrous, a deliberate Frankensteinian policy to acoustic traditional instruments. So the results are amazing. Instruments that shouldn't be able to slide, like bassoons and oboes and things, do slide. Reminds me a little bit of what Björk was doing in 2022 on her album Fossora, where she would work with 5 bass clarinetists. I really admire her arrangements and her daring. I do feel a little bit like I do about late Scott Walker or late David Sylvian. Late Björk is more admirable in the conception than in the listening. I find the lack of hooks, pop melodies and hooks, a little bit disconcerting, but her arrangement style is very, very suggestive and interesting to me. So I was going to buy a clarinet. That was my first idea. I was going to do for this album what the accordion had done for the accordion album and the few albums after that, which was find an instrument, a new instrument, and sort of try to master it or play it in my own way. My sister used to have a clarinet in the 70s, which I would borrow for my demo recordings, my home compositions, in order to try and sound like David Bowie on Heroes, where he would play a very expressionistic saxophone on side 2, tracks like Neukölln.
The lines of greed pass the speed of time. Distance between us should be a crime. And I can't keep the torments away. I can't keep the torments away.
But I didn't see any clarinets in the old flea market outside here, and probably they're very expensive, and it's very hard to play. You've got to warm up the reed and all the rest of it, and even to get a note out of an instrument like an oboe or a clarinet is quite tricky. And probably it would have sounded horrible and would have taken hours of experimentation. So what I ended up doing, to sound a bit like Jerskin Fendrix, I thought I would just play my iPad and play some sort of ancient Greek instruments and things which are in the world section of the iPad, play Japanese scales on a koto, and then bend those notes around. I mean, a koto can bend because the strings can be bent. It does bend, but that's how I started Threnody. And very quickly it stopped sounding like Jerskin Fendrix and started sounding like Momus. In fact, it sounded too much like Momus in the folktronic mode, that people started complaining and saying I was getting stale and repeating myself. Artists do repeat themselves. I mean, some artists like Georges Brassens, for instance, never evolved their style at all. I think it's quite admirable to stick with the same stand-up bass and acoustic guitar and the same stance with your leg on the chair, that you've always had, and there's something interesting about that. You can cut Georges Brassens like a stick of rock at any point and you'll find the same arrangement style, the same lettering, the same themes. I'm an artist a bit like that because, I mean, I do keep chopping and changing my style and copying other people's styles, picking up on things that are in the air at the time, using the Japanese engineers who are programming the instruments I'm using their imaginations for arrangement ideas and things. But I do that precisely because I'm very repetitive in my themes and my interests and my obsessions, my compulsions. So I do keep coming back. I always start with a slightly experimental idea, but I keep converging back towards pop music and towards hooks and songs that you remember. My songs are very hooky, which just makes it weird that I'm such a marginal artist, because in a sense, each of my songs could be a hit. And some of them have been hits in Japan and in parallel worlds, They're all hits in a parallel world, aren't they? So, Threnody, it just ended up sounding like a folktronic track. And of course there is this book, John Robinson, who's my chronicler, really my Boswell, the Boswell to my musical Johnson. Poor old John. It's topical again, that style, because of Robinson's book, which is called Folktronics, which looks at the period from 1996 to 2008. I hope there's a third book, because I'm most interested in my most recent 21st century albums. I think they're the most interesting by far. But I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I'm the person I am. And this would, crop up in slightly different guises, notably in Pillicock in 2017 when I was in Japan, and I'd done a Japanese kind of influenced record, and then I came back round to the European via the films of Pasolini, where Pasolini did a medieval trilogy or a Renaissance trilogy using Boccaccio, the Decameron, the Arabian Nights and stuff like that, and getting very bawdy and dirty in the process. And I liked the bawdiness and the chaotic honking kind of sound of the music expressing that. So Threnody was just the latest in a long series of honking. But people, I'm not going to do a Stuart Lee thing and read out the negative comments, but people saying, you've done this before. But I like it. I think of that subgenre within my work, it's a good example. It's a lot more successful than Totentanz. And I sort of took lyrics randomly from the Odyssey and Nikos Kazantzakis, which I've had. I mean, it was a big influence on me when I was about 10, and when we lived in Athens, my mother, I guess, bought a copy of Nikos Kazantzakis' enormous epic poem, which is a reworking of the Odyssey. And I just loved the cover, which is a sort of Bridget Riley design. But I hadn't really read it. I don't know if anyone's read it, actually, but it looks great. So I just dip into it like the I Ching and find words in there, like loam, which is, topsoil, which has been trampled down and is fructifying, is nourishing the plants. So this line about a butterfly trampled down to loam. Some of these are just kind of random. You never know. I like very concise songs which have a time, place, and action, a unity of time, place, and action. But I also like songs which I don't know what they're about. Especially when I'm starting an album, I like to make songs which are test probes. And what is in my mind right now? What is in our collective unconscious? A reference to Duchamp's Big Glass, which was smashed apparently to his satisfaction. There's it's a lot of Strip Me Like a Bachelor and Smash Me Like a Glass, because the big glass is called The Bride Stripped Bare. The Bride Stripped Bare by Her Bachelor's Even, a title actually Brian Ferry used in one of his solo albums. So just a lot of things, that can be beauty. That idea that Duchamp expressed, he wasn't at all upset apparently that this glass artwork had been broken. He thought it looked better smashed than not smashed. I guess it expresses the violence, the potential violence of the world. So Yikes the Executioner has come wobbling round again, and it's because, we're in a year where there's a lot of hatred and a lot of division in the political world, and a lot of instability, a lot of votes coming up in which people are expected to vote the wrong way, as I see it. They're going to vote right, expressing their resentments and dissatisfactions in an incorrect way, I would say. They should be voting left, obviously. They don't, because a class in itself never becomes a class for itself, as we say often in these talks. So there's Duchamp's big glass, the smashed glass. There's a braggart on the throne, a swaggerer on the throne, trampled down to loam. I don't know who is the club-nosed, horse-legged, nervous stalwart. I think that comes from Kazantzakis. So it would be Odysseus coming home, and there is someone on the throne who is illegitimate, who's a bastard, who has to be disposed of and replaced by the rightful heir. This is the epic structure of the Odyssey. You know, he's been away. He's had these episodic adventures in various places on his travels. He's back, and there's somebody who's replaced him with his wife and with his people, and he's got to dislodge this person. So that's playing in there as a kind of structuring myth, I guess. And heading up to Spain, again, Spain, the Spanish Civil War, a lot of intellectuals in the 30s, possibly we're in the 30s again, you know, in a certain sense, headed to Spain because they saw that as the first battleground, a pre-war, pre-Second World War, proper experimental battleground between fascism and republicanism, the leftism. And of course, Franco won that war, and the leftists were routed. So unfortunately, it may be predicting where we're going again. Journaling, I like to put in these buzzwords, which I'm only just learning. Journaling is something I see a lot in the vlogs that I watch. People say, oh, I'm going to a cafe to do some journaling. It really helps me to... And I think, what is journaling? Is that just, is that making a to-do list? Or is that making a list of kind of pep-talking proverbs and self-help items and things? Or is it just writing your diary like I used to do and have done throughout my life at various points? It's probably a combination of all those. I kind of don't believe in self-pep talk. I don't believe in redemption. To-do lists are useful, although I wouldn't put them in my diary. I'd put them separately. But there's also eco-lashing. Actually, there isn't such a word as eco-lashing, but green lashing is a word this year, a word I hadn't encountered before. But green lashing is basically when greenwashing politicians and companies who claim to have cared about the environment reverse any measures which have been protective of the environment and anti-climate crisis because they're going to lose votes or they're going to lose customers, or people grumble about them, usually because people's car driving freedoms, inverted commas, are being threatened. So all this stuff is kind of in the papers, and you know, generally I'm at a bit of an arm's length from the papers, but it is all in there. So before the war, the next track, we're actually moving on to track 2 here. I was watching stuff about Jacques Brel, which Jacques Brel's been a sort of repressed influence ever since I discovered Gainsbourg, really in the mid-80s. So, but I went back and was watching this documentary about Brel, and I thought, didn't Brel have an affair with Catherine Sauvage? I think that was his first major affair when after he left his wife, although he stayed married to his wife. Although she stayed in Brussels, I think, most of the time, while Brel was off in Paris or off on endless tours of the Francophone world, having affairs with people like Catherine Sauvage, who was a little bit like Barbara or Juliette Greco, one of these very early 60s French chanson people, pre-Françoise Hardy, because Françoise Hardy starts, you hear the English influence, as you do in Gainsbourg, but pre that there's a kind of very French world which is so local and unique and Gallic, with accordions, and you can feel the influence of Brecht and Weill on it, strangely enough, but you can't hear any British or American influence. It's pre-Beatles, you know. So there's a track called Le Ton du Tango, which is a tango. And there is something very satisfying about the tango, the passion, usually slightly tongue-in-cheek passion when it's done as a kind of pastiche tango, as Catherine Sauvage's. Catherine Sauvage's Pont du Tango is actually it's a song by Leo Ferré, which I didn't realize at the time I was listening to it, but it's got this kind of little structure where there's a kind of pregnant pause before the music resumes, so it kind of goes dun 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 dun. You can sort of imagine people doing the tango to this and doing those very vehement movements. Tango is it's Argentinian, isn't it? Argentinian, I think. So it's got this kind of southern hemispheric passion built into it, which you can play around with. And the French chansonniers were playing around with that a lot in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, doing existentialism tangos and things like that. So this kind of Kurt Weill, I mean, I exaggerated the discords in the bits I sampled from Sauvage. I don't know who did the arrangements. It sounds like Gérard Joannest, who did a lot of brass arrangements. But because I had layered the brass, kind of the very vehement brass stabs in the tango section, I made it more discordant and more kind of emphatic. This song really, are we approaching a new war? The signs of hate and division and retrenchment behind national borders, which we're seeing a lot, is really what this song is about. After Threnody, which was kind of a bit like word salad, I wanted to do something quite sincere and straightforward. So it really looks at what I see when I go out onto the streets, which is homeless people, drug addicts. Paris has a real problem with crack and with fentanyl, and America even worse, an opioid crisis. A lot of people who basically lost in life and who are not doing as well as they might have been doing on the job market and in their personal lives turn to opioids and become addicted. And there's whole cities around the Porte de la Chapelle of these kind of homeless people who are fentanyl addicts. So it's hardly utopia with the crackheads and the whores, the zombies zonked on fentanyl, sleeping indoors. Could it be worse? These are the days before the war. So really this emerging theme of do we have the kind of liberties or the kind of system that we believe in? It's really a question of what I used to still call super legitimacy or just legitimacy, simple. Do we believe in a system enough to fight for it? Do we believe in ideals and principles enough to die for them? Democracy, for instance, seems to be dying in many ways. And do we believe in it? I'm not even sure if I believe in it, because when I see what people vote for, or that politicians can't do the things that need to be done, like decarbonisation, because they will lose votes, because there are a lot of car drivers out there who don't want their liberties infringed on as they see it. So a lot of these things are in crisis. A lot of cherished Western ideals are in crisis just now. And at the same time, there's this rise of the oligarchs and of dictators, autocrats, who are just always there in power and never even bother with democracy, or just go through charades, as Putin is about to do in Russia, charades of democracy in which they've killed their opponents, basically murdered anyone who might stand up to them, might oppose them in a democratic process, and then they just get whoever bothers to vote in Russia, they get them to rubber stamp whatever they're doing, whatever war they want to carry out, etc., etc. So it's not great. It is a moment of crisis. So that before the war thing is, it's a state of the nation address, if you like. The next track was Stare in a Hole. This went through a lot of different versions, but essentially it's because I listened a lot to fall asleep. I listened to Radio 4 Extra, and they were doing or repeating a serialization of George Orwell's Coming Up for Air, which was again we're in the late 30s, just before the Second World War with that novel. They used this theme tune which I hadn't heard before, which was by the Ink Spots, and it's called If I Didn't Care. Fantastic falsetto singing by the lead vocalist of the Ink Spots. And I thought I should use my higher vocal registers like that, I did actually on the last album, the first track, Murder Me, and a few tracks on that album used very high singing and louder singing than I'm usually using, and I really appreciate that. It's good in concerts, especially to project your voice like that. And my high register voice, like anyone of my age, is disintegrating somewhat. But I even find the way it's disintegrating quite interesting. The way that certain notes, I can't hit them initially when I start singing the song, and then as my vocal pipes warm up, I can hit them. And I really like that, the edginess of hitting your very highest notes in the song. So it's got some lines from the Marx Brothers in there. My name's What Do You Care? My home is anywhere. People say I'm awful dumb. So do you. I thought I'd come.
Hey, what do you think you are?
Hey, wait a minute. You know who this is?
No.
He sells frankfurters at the Merchant of Venus.
Well, what do you want? My name is What Do You Care? My home is anywhere. People say I'm awful dumb, so I thought to you I'd come. Say, listen, what is it about that?
Now, just a moment. Wait a minute. He might be crazy. Wait, I'll find out.
I love those little poems that the Marx Brothers do. Slow beats, again, a feature of this record. Very slow beats, because you can make things very emphatic when you really slow things down. Eyes, staring a hole with your eyes, I guess that's an expression people use, stop staring at me because you're making a hole. You're burning like the sun. The eyes eyes are the seat of your subjecthood. When people look into your eyes, they really feel that they're seeing the real you. That's the most personal sight you get of someone, is looking into their eyes. And it's something that's, in a sense, taboo to do with strangers, for instance. You're looking at me, mate. The kind of thing you don't do in Glasgow, apparently. And but it's where the subject and the object, you objectify by staring at someone, by looking at someone. You're sort of seeing them as an object, but you're also seeing them as a subject. So I kind of play on this a little bit in this, that my eyes have been hiding in plain sight. The eyes are about sight. I do hide one of my eyes, so as a blind person, I'm very conscious, partially blind person, I'm very conscious of these issues that you can partially see, and but also you're hiding, all that stuff. So stop staring a hole through my disguise. Again, I'm a disguised person. I guess as a kind of Peter Pan, I'm disguising myself as a younger person for a start. This isn't a mask, it's my real face, these are my eyes, subject and object, day and night. I love the many-sidedness of things, things which are contradictions in themselves. So the eyes as objectifying and also as the seat of the subject, that's an interesting contradiction. I'll stare you to the Stone Age, all that stuff, staring at something aggressive, as something objectifying. I guess I sit in cafes a lot, and I'm very aware of the play of eyes. Paris cafes are a particular form of the genre, where chairs are often arranged on a sidewalk so that you can observe the life of the street in a theatrical way. That's something, I've always noticed that you don't really see that so much in other countries. It really is a moment of theatre, and the streets are like stage sets in Paris. And people are dressed like actors in Paris. So it's an aspect of the city, this sort of dandy-esque and theatrical aspect, which I find very interesting, and which I like. You've got to like a high-density situation where people are enjoying the presence of other people. So stop staring a hole through my disguise. Fate gives you gifts you shouldn't decline. Close your eyes, I'll keep them with mine. Just funny lines like that. They all give you the glad eye, but they'll stab you in your sleep. Yeah, I'm not really sure where this song is coming from, but it's sort of touching on issues which I find very interesting. Becoming You was the next one, the fourth song, and that started as a very fast 170 BPM sequencer thing, which sounded a bit like The Passage, song of theirs I like a lot called Animal in Me. And then I just kept working and reworking it, and it kept changing. It's like doing a painting, you can start with a painting of an elephant and it ends up as a painting of a matchstick, a burning matchstick. So this became a horrible metal number for a while, this track. And then I thought, no, it needs to be more delicate and avant-garde. So there were all these tracks, a huge number of tracks going in different directions. And samples from Morton Feldman and Leo Chadbourne and all these people. People I turn to when I want to make things more subtle. Beautiful arrangement ideas, you know. I sort of get these orchestral sounds, which are modern orchestral, contemporary classical, like Leo Chadbourne. And then, so this finally came together after about a couple of days of working on it, and I was having headaches and things and neglecting my body and, you know, all the rest of it. But I think it turned out nicely. It's, again, using very high vocal registers. And I'd watched, I'd been following the post office scandal in the UK and how junior sub-postmasters were persecuted by senior management who had instituted a new computer system. So it just seems an example of an institution which you might have thought of as quite benign, actually being completely malign. And people losing faith, you know, the whole thing of whistleblowers turning against their own organizations when they see how corrupt they are from the inside. I was watching a documentary about IKEA. They're one of the main consumers in the world of wood, and they claim to be replenishing forests and using responsible planting techniques in Poland and all over Eastern Europe where they harvest a lot of wood. They're actually not. When you investigate, when whistleblowers and activists go out to investigate what IKEA is doing, they're actually abusing the forests, cutting things down, not replanting, cutting virgin forests, using, you know, breaking all the rules essentially, bringing in illegal timber from Siberia through the Russians, all the rest of it. So this song, it's not just the little guy saying you're cheating me, you're not living up, you're a hypocrite. It's the people who are administering. And I say this as a bourgeois Scot, and the Scots administered the British Empire for the English essentially. We're very responsible, stalwart fellows, you know, militarily and administratively helping out, you know, with things that we don't actually believe in often. We have different principles and ethics from, I hope, from the English. I kind of feel, and also it's a question of people I went to university with who then rose through organizations, became big lawyers, or, you know, went into companies. Someone I went to school with was in Virgin, for instance, the Virgin Company, with Richard Branson administering the space program for Virgin, for God's sake, Virgin Galactic. All these people, you know, they're kind of in it but not of it, and they often start off with really good intentions. They're great people, idealistic, whatever, but they're corrupted by power and by their proximity to power and by the very responsibility conferred on them by power to administer systems which they're not personally maybe shareholders of or profiting in, but they're simply stalwart fellows who, you know, hands. They're in the sense of Japan hands, you know, people who are administering on behalf of the real profiteers and rentier capitalists who are actually a managerial class. So I really come from that managerial class, although I'm a black sheep in it. And this song is saying, I don't want to become. I've seen what you guys do within my organization. I don't want to become you, but I am becoming you. I guess it's something, again, the sort of chanson influence Jacques Brel in a song like Les Bourgeois, which I performed live at the Barbican a decade or so ago. It's a song which in just 3 or 4 short verses you show people, idealistic young students studying law, becoming lawyers, becoming the people they always mocked, the bourgeois people they always mocked. So this is definitely something, by the age of, you know, 60, whatever, you see how this trajectory works. And you see the disillusionment as well of people within organizations who given their whole lives working for an institution that they believed in. And then by the end of their lives, they realize it's utterly corrupt. It must be heartbreaking. And you must think, what the hell was I doing with my life? Luckily, I've avoided that by just stubbornly concentrating on things that I love, like making records.
Open University.